telling me this before. The combination of getting a better seal and getting the right viscosity oil, you know, you can talk about picking up on a 400 horsepower engine, you pick up 8, 10, 15 horsepower through the ring pack, but with the right oil, how much more on top of that can you get?
I mean, I would say between the oil and the piston rings, if you optimize that, I bet there's at least 30 horsepower right there.
That's impressive. I mean, and that's just horsepower that's normally wasted to friction. That's just turned into heat. It's a wasted horsepower. It's a extra duress on the oil and everything else.
You know, here's the one thing we've seen over the years in several different engines doing dyno testing with oil stuff. And this is something that almost no one, I bet, pays really close attention to. Oil level.
Okay.
If you have a stroker engine, you've added stroke to the crankshaft.
Right.
If you did not change your oil pan on a wet sump engine to compensate for that, if you still put the oil level back to full, guarantee you've already knocked 25 horsepower, 20 horsepower out of your engine, and you've probably added about 10, 15 degrees of operating temperature to your engine because you've overfilled the engine. Because that crankshaft, that oil level was designed for the stock stroke.
Right.
So that's how far it goes down. If I go add stroke, it's now going down and hitting the oil, which is just going to rob power. Well, on the dyno, how we look at it is we look at oil pressure. Look at the oil pressure at the end of the run. So we want to see that oil pressure, if that pressure relief valve is holding steady, we really shouldn't see a big increase in oil pressure. And the sign that you're overfilled is at the end of your long dyno pull, if oil pressure drops. If you see oil pressure dropping at all in a wet sump engine over the course, you're overfilled. That's the way to know.
Interesting. Very interesting.
It doesn't drop a lot,
right.
Just a little bit. If it drops, say, 3 or 4 PSI toward the end of the run, you're overfilled.
Interesting. So, having the right combination of piston ring, having the right combination of the viscosity of the oil and using the right oil, that's part of it, but all that gets kind of thrown out the window when the machine shop doesn't do the correct surface finish, doesn't have the right geometry in the bore. Can you care to talk a little bit about that?
Ring seal, I always call it's soup, it's not steak. So this piston ring has to work with this piston, and it's got to work with the cylinder wall and the motor oil. They all have to work in concert together. They're not in isolation. They're all interdependent. That last part of this equation is the cylinder bore surface finish, and if you don't have a tool like that, the profilometer, that can measure that surface finish in micro inches, which is a millionth of an inch, there's no way you're gonna know if you have the correct surface or not. And here's the real key. Back to the older piston rings and newer piston rings, that material technology. So in the old days when we had we'll call it maybe that plasma moly ring. So it's a ductile iron ring that has the moly sprayed on it. That spray moly coating made the ring break in easy, which is good, but it's soft, so it doesn't live as long. But the one advantage of that ring is that that spray process held oil. So you could be really smooth and miss your surface finish by a mile essentially, and you still be okay, because the ring could hold oil. But when you go to the thinner rings, the steel rings that can hold more power, they're more durable, there's no porosity because there's nothing sprayed on here. This is a thin film coating. No pores means there's no oil retention. So now the onus is on the cylinder finish. So a lot of people know honing and they think about RA finish because that's what was in all the books, right? That if you use this stone, you get this RA number. Okay, well, RA doesn't tell you enough.
That's just an average of everything going on, and it could be good stuff going on and bad stuff going on. And you just don't know.
RA and that RA are the exact same. You know, one of these is a bed of nails that your piston rings don't want to be on, and the other one's like little plateaus that can support the load. And I always say it's like doing push-ups on your fingertips versus your palms. If we're doing this, you're going to get tired pretty quick. If you're on your palms, you can do it for a lot longer. There's more load-bearing area. If I don't have any valleys to hold the oil, now my rings are gonna run dry. I'm gonna lose that gasket that the oil is between the cylinder wall and the piston ring. So that's why having the profilometer to measure those valleys, we call RVK, that's the key number, and that's what this device can give you. And that's an amazing little tool, by the way, because you don't want to try to hold that by hand.
Yeah, especially
this makes this job so easy.
Especially when your hand is coated in honing oil.
Right.
Makes it even more fun.
Yeah, when it's slippery and stinky,
should be okay.
The stylus has got to come back, because the stylus drags across this little tiny diamond tip stylus in there. It's got to do the job. Yep, now it's back at home, and it's tracing that. Now, one thing to keep in mind here, when you're looking at this scale, that's right at plus or minus 200 microinches. That total is 400 microinches, right?
Okay.
That is 4/10 of a thousandth.
Oh, wow.
The total is 4/10 of a thousandth. You're looking at that scale. So you're looking at that trace right now, most of that's within 100. So that's 1/10 of a thousandth is that complete surface finish.
That is crazy. Okay, so let's look at some of these numbers. RA, that's our average finish. Right here, we're at 10. RK, though, that's one of the more important ones.
That's your core roughness.
Core roughness, right? And that's at 29. RPK at 7.7 and RVK at 22.6. Now, this is a lot lower number than I would have expected on this. I think we would have liked to see...
pretty smooth finish.
Yeah, pretty smooth finish.
We like to see, with a steel ring, you want to see that RVK upwards of 45.
Right, that's always a number we're shooting for.
45, 50, like today we were doing that engine test. In between each ring test, we're using the profilometer, checking the cylinders to make sure we got at least 50 to 60 RVK so that we know that there's no variable you're throwing into this. So the more valley, the better, especially when you're putting more fuel to it. You go to say E85, an engine like this, right? This engine was made for boost, right? You're not gonna run this engine in A, right? You wanna put some boost to it. And you probably wanna throw some E85 at it so you can run more boost, because if a little boost is good, well, we know more is better. You need more valley. So you would wanna have those valley numbers maybe 65 to 70 if you're running a lot of boost on E85.
I like to call it the electronic fingernail. And you know, machinists use it all the time, because sometimes you'll look at a surface and you'll be like, oh, what is that? And you can see stuff that isn't actually doing anything. But when you take your fingernail and you drag it on a surface, that's when you see if there's actually something on a surface that needs to be addressed.
That's a great point. You can use this tool not just for cylinder bores, but also for making sure the deck has the right roughness for your MLS gaskets.
Exactly. Back in the days when people used a lot of composite gaskets, they were very forgiving. In fact, you know, some of those manufacturers' train of thought was, leave it rough, it bites into the gasket, it holds it in place and stuff. And unfortunately, some of the machine shops that are machining modern blocks today still hold to that, because that worked for them with that. But now an MLS gasket, that's the last thing you'd want. It's basically like a fingernail just dragging itself on the surface, recording what it's seeing there, and recording both the valleys and the peaks, everything that's happening there.
Like you said, the old days, those, you know, composite gaskets were forgiving, kind of like those Molly rings were forgiving. You didn't have to be spot on your surface. You could have all kinds of crazy ideas about surface finish, and it would allow you to do that. But when you go to the better materials, steel gaskets, steel rings, now that surface finish is the thing you have to have in order to make this work.
And an RA of 25 would be great for an MLS gasket.
Just for fun, let's see what the RVK looks like.
RVK of 131 on this.
So isn't that amazing to think that this looks smoother than that cylinder does, but there's actually more valley in this, which just goes to show your eyes will lie to you.
One of the things I learned, you know, becoming a machinist, basically, one of the things that surprised me the most was how you have to use your other senses. You know, it's not all about what you see and what you read on a you know, a micrometer or a caliper. It's what you feel when you're machining something. Is it vibrating or not? It's what you hear. Yeah, all those things. It's like, it's incredible. You got to use all your senses.
My kids always make fun of me. It's like, Dad, you can't hear anything we're saying, but you can hear these things in these engines.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You know, you got all these people doing, you know, e-tunes and stuff on cars or doing remote tuning. And to me, it's just like, wow, it's tough to really endorse that, because being in the car and feeling it and hearing it right there.
You smell it.
Yeah, and smelling. Yeah, all these things. Like,
you can smell it when it's rich.
Is that maple syrup or is that ethylene glycol? What do we got? Is this head gasket lifting? Like,
don't taste it though, by the way. Don't taste any of these things you're talking about. You don't want to lick the block. You don't want to put the oil in your mouth. But don't do that.